This makes me think of something. Time is kind of hard to follow when you read a book. There's a lot of jumping around. Chapter 14 is officially the start of Sunday morning, so everything that we've heard up until now has been either on Friday or Saturday. So, just to keep things in perspective, Norman spoke twice on Saturday. We heard one of those speeches at least, and Burton, after one of those speeches, tried to charge $20,000. And on Saturday, while Burton was trying to charge $20,000 to his credit card, his wife became very upset and started to drive across the state to go to the Marriott Convention Center to see her cousin Vinny. And that night, Saturday night, Norman took a special adventure to the rooftop bar where he met Martin. Now, we don't know if Norman ever accepted Martin's deal. The chapter ended before he took Martin's hand or walked away. And we don't know whatever happened with Martha. When we last left her, she was asleep in her car, but Vinny was driving. So it's Sunday morning. Hopefully Martin's in bed and Martha is resting in the car on a long drive. Out in the forest the orange tree grows, way in the back nobody knows. The fruit it grows is magical indeed. Just one bite will put you to sleep. Welcome back. This is an Orange Tree video production called Bedtime Stories with Jared. Here you will hear stories read in a whisper to induce relaxation, sleep, and ASMR tingles. Please make sure that your headphones are plugged in and over each ear before you begin. Let's get started. Chapter 14, Sunday morning. It's a wonderful sound, isn't it? The alarm sounds at 4:15 a.m. It hits Norman like a bag of bricks today. At a certain age, the body stops responding well to alcohol in any amount, and hangovers become something very real. There are no cures, there are no mantras. Nothing but lots of water and time will save him this morning. What time did he go to bed last night? Was it 2 a.m.? Was it 2:30? Whatever time it was late. And now the alarm clock is telling Norman that he has to get ready for the day. Norman rolls out of bed. He showers, he dresses, he adjusts his belt, and he stops to look at the clock before he leaves. Norman's routine is regular and timely, and he knows that the clock will read 4:30 as he places his first step out of the hotel room door. He turns to see the time to verify that he is on schedule, but the clock reads 4:59. Oh boy, this is going to be a long day. Norman walks halfway down the hall and then comes right back to the room. He grabs his gym bag. Today we are going to change the schedule, Norman. The dressing room in the hotel gym will be empty at 5:30 on a Sunday. Norman is going to have the gym all to himself. If he can get some aerobics in, he'll be just fine for the rest of the day. Blood flow and oxygen to the brain is what he needs to get beyond this throbbing pain. Norman jumps on the stationary bike and starts pedaling. He pedals slowly at first. Then he gives a burst of speed. He slows down for a bit. Then he gives another burst. Norman can feel his heart racing again. high-intensity interval training has been his favorite time saver in the gym ever since Linda left him. 20 minutes is all it takes to wear any strong man down, if it is done correctly. Norman looks at the clock mounted on the wall between the televisions. He should have just enough time to relax in the hot tub before he starts his day. Norman changes in the dressing room. He puts on a swimsuit and rinses all the sweat off his body in the shower before finding signs that lead to the hot tub and swimming pool area. Disappointment covers him when Norman sees a towel on the chair in the pool area. Who uses a hot tub at Sunday morning at 6 a.m., he wonders. He turns the corner to see Eugenia. Eugenia sits in the hot tub with her back to the men's dressing room, but Norman recognizes her long brown hair in an instant. She turns slowly to see who is calling her name. Her eyes are tired, and Norman would never mention the bags that had formed beneath them. Eugenia is having the same kind of morning that Norman is having. Norm. She feigns some enthusiasm with her tired eyes and her tired voice. Norman can tell that she is both glad to see him and too tired to pretend that she has any energy left. Norman climbs into the hot tub. What are we doing up this early? Eugenia ponders the question. I was just wondering the same thing, she says. On the bright side, I don't have to be anywhere today, and I'm not speaking today like you are. You're not speaking? Norman asks. Eugenia smiles. Did you sign up for Martin's program? Are you officially one of us now? Norman can feel his chest tighten. He suddenly remembers the last moments of the night. What did you do, Norman? He thinks to himself. Yeah. Norman places his head into his hands and then runs his hand through his hair. I guess I'm part of the family. I got to email my accountant today and have him take out a loan to pay Martin his money. I have 7 days to make good on the payment. You won't regret it, Eugenia says. This is my first event as a promoter. Norman, how much did you pay to speak at this conference? No, it doesn't matter. I really don't want to know. If you paid the outrageous fee that I charged, then you're part of the reason I don't have to speak today. And if you didn't pay the outrageous fee, well, then you agreed to let me have 90% of your book sales. So either way, I win. Norman finally puts it all together. So the next level for us is learning how to bring this sheep in for slaughter, so to speak, so that speakers have a ripe audience for the picking. Norman tries to let this settle with his morals, but it doesn't settle completely. I guess it makes sense at least, but where does Martin fit in? Martin is my coach, Eugenia says. I made the same deal with him that you made last night, and now he's here to help me through the process and make sure that my first big event goes smoothly. Martin has between 12 and 20 of us around the world, booking hotels, marketing to an audience, finding people to attend it. It's a lot of work, but it's not nearly as time-consuming as presenting week after week after week after week. Eugenia lets her eyes roll into the back of her head as she emphasizes the monotony of the circuit speaker's schedule. Norman starts doing the math. If every person cut the same deal as him, then that's a minimum of 12 people at $500,000 each. So that means that Martin makes a minimum of $6 million a year on the low end for doing nothing. And chances are good that at least a few of them paid the full $5 million that Martin said last night. Has he told you yet that he won't take cash? Eugenia asks. He mentioned something last night, but I thought he was joking. Martin said that he wanted it all in diamonds or gold bars. Is he really serious? The thing about cash, Eugenia leans forward, excited to share something that most people never consider. The thing about cash is, if you pay him in cash, the banks have to report it. They report anything over $10,000 to the IRS. That means that Martin has to claim the income. But if you pay him in diamonds, rubies, paintings, etc., well, then there's no one to report it. Eugenia clarifies. Imagine that Martin shows up at Sotheby's to auction off $10 million in diamonds. Sure, it's a strange lot, but who's to say where he got the diamonds? Maybe they were in a safe box all these years. So he sells the diamonds and deposits it into the bank, and he tells the bank that the money is from the sale of goods that he already owned. And maybe he actually sold the diamonds at a loss compared to when he bought them so many years ago. Eugenia raises her hands in quotes to stress the irony of her statement. Eugenia looks into Norman's eyes to see if he is understanding. You see, if there's no income, then there's no income tax. So he can move money around and never have to pay the IRS their fair share. That's why he wants you to pay him in diamonds. And yes, he is very serious. Norman settles into the hot tub as the realization sets in. That's criminal. Norman considers the scheme further. But I guess in a way it's also genius. Maybe. Eugenia adds, these are the things that Martin will teach you that almost none of us think about. What you call criminal, he calls asset protection. Eugenia shifts her tone to a lower and more private volume. Hey, Norm? She slides a little closer to him. Was I picking up any signals from you last night? She leans in slightly to share her secret. I'm a little rusty on reading signals, but I think I'll have some time coming up, and maybe I need to dust off my radar and get back in the game, if you know what I mean. Norman turns pink in the cheeks and slides a little closer to Eugenia. They're face to face now. Norman leans forward and over the side of the hot tub and tries to position his arm in a way that shows that he is not desperate, but definitely interested. I'm not opposed to helping you dust off your radar. Norman tries to sound confident, but instead he is awkward and his delivery is shaky and nervous. Eugenia asks, are you going to the Mega Success Conference next week, or that Entrepreneurs Kickstart? I'm going to the Kickstart, Norman says. Oh, good, Eugenia smiles. So am I. You know, Eugenia, we will still have some time this weekend. Maybe you and I could go to dinner tonight. Norman sounds hopeful. Any chance that he had of playing it cool is gone. No, not tonight, Norman. Give me a week, and then I'll be up for dinner. Maybe dessert, too. Eugenia gives Norman a wink and a soft kiss before she departs. Norman watches as she leaves. His life seems to be getting better already. The next 3 chapters are all about Martin, and so we're going to go a little bit back in time. This is the first time that we mentioned years in the book. So the story's happening in some unknown year, but we're going to go back to 2005. The water's good. Whispering is tough on the vocal cords. Chapter 15. The Rise and Fall of a Giant. Back in 2005, Martin Fowler had it all. On Wall Street, the money just flowed. He got his job right out of school. He worked hard, and he climbed his way to the top. After 10 years at the firm, he had his own team. Trading was good, and the market was safer than ever if you knew what you were doing. Even with the fat bank account and the sweet penthouse apartment in New York City, Martin wanted more. So he was open to new opportunities when two men started talking about how much money they were making at Martin's favorite members-only bar. The Bull and Bear Club was the ritzy kind of place that one pays $50,000 per year just for the option to enter through the front doors. The main bar was carved from a solid piece of mahogany, and the bar's fascia was ornamented with hand-carved whirling leaves and floral patterns. On either side of the mirror behind the bar, statues of Roman goddesses hold a mantle which casts a brilliant light on the unlabeled decanters below. The bartenders knew the contents of each bottle by heart. Serving from the bottle with the label would have cheapened the experience. The two men yammering at the bar did not look like they belonged there. The clothing that they wore was all wrong. Shoes were closed-toed and had no laces. The belts were silver color, and the discoloration on one belt suggested to Martin that the belt buckle might actually be plastic with silver plating. These guys had enough money to get past the front doors, but they didn't earn it the long, hard way, and they didn't inherit it from parents who would teach them how to dress and how to act. The fact that these two men were not in jail meant that they did not likely steal their fortunes either, but Martin had to wonder anyway. Martin sat closer to them. He listened. He wanted to know how they could afford the annual dues, and he wondered if they would scrape together the cash for next year's dues too. Martin had been a member of the Bull and Bear Club for 3 years now, and these types of men don't usually last long, but they always make him curious. The bartender has known Martin since he joined 3 years ago. He doesn't even have to ask. He just brings Martin the usual, a Bowmore, 25-year-old blended scotch. Neither the bartender nor Martin would know that this bottle of scotch would be named best in the world later that year. But Martin would not be surprised. Martin enjoyed the craftsmanship, the warm, smoky flavor, and that subtle hint of toffee. He would sit at the back of the bar alone, sip his Bowmore, and let the fluid roll back and forth over his tongue. The Bowmore was a small reward for a good, hard day at the office, and Martin often imagined that his father used to celebrate the same way. And in this way, Martin was not only celebrating his short-term successes, but the success of generations that is carried forward through hard work and the practical application of strong traditions. Men, like the two loudmouths sitting next to Martin, would never know the love of a good scotch. They lived life too quickly. But Martin was envious still. Martin works hard for his money. He puts in long days at the office, year after year. But these guys just started in real estate last year. Already, from the sounds of it, they were making as much money as Martin does, if not more. The real estate market was strong in 2005. Martin watched as prices climbed. The banks are hard to convince, but even the banks loved real estate. If you said the words real estate when asking for money from a bank in 2005, all the paperwork and red tape suddenly disappeared. The doors blocking your way just opened up, one door after another. Martin knew this well. Martin thinks about all the things that his money does and does not buy him. One of the things Martin wants most is a simple vacation. Every day, he has to be in the office. That's what it takes to be on top. No breaks. Sure, Martin could get away for a weekend to upstate New York. He could find a nice cabin, but he couldn't disappear for a week in San Martin or in the Mediterranean. No, Martin was to be a slave to the office where his trades were made. He listens as the men talk. He listens as they talk about how they're jealous of their lenders. Martin laughs to himself. I guess no one is happy with their own success. The grass is always greener on the other side, isn't it? Martin listens as they talk about their envy. They don't have to do anything, and they take home more than we do. It's just not right. We've got to find a better way of doing this. Maybe find more private investors who are green. Or if we can just get access to more funds, we can grow faster and get to the point where we can self-finance. Martin just listens. He thinks about his own retirement fund. It grows with a decent return. But these guys are talking about short-term loans with points. With that kind of turnover, he could double and triple his retirement money. Maybe then he could get away with a little vacation and not worry so much about what would happen if he was away from the office for just one extra day. Martin motions to the bartender. He wants to buy 2 Bowmores for his new friends. Excuse me, gentlemen, I hate to interrupt, but I think I can help you. Martin and the men form a great relationship, and Martin does help them. And for the next 3 years, Martin's life changes. In just 3 years, everything is different. Martin no longer worries about paying the exorbitant mortgage on the penthouse condo in Manhattan. Martin no longer stresses about whether or not he can afford the $50,000 per year membership fee at the Bull and Bear Club. Everything is different. But everything is not as Martin had planned it to be. The thing about getting rich quickly is that when one gets rich quickly, one becomes poor quickly also. Martin formed a friendship that night at the bar years ago, and it paid off for the short term only. The 2 men made him a fortune. His money performed better in real estate than it ever did in the stock market. Within 12 months, he moved everything he owned into real estate to accelerate his climb to the top of the financial ladder. The problem is, so did everyone else at that time. Everyone entered the real estate market hoping to make money. When people buy in large numbers with the sole purpose of making money and no actual intention of keeping or using the item that they purchase, they drive prices up. People who actually get out early make lots of money. But everyone else, wanting the same kind of return for their investment, drive the price up to a point that no one can justify buying anymore, and the market crashes. That is what happened to Martin. And that is what happened to all of Martin's friends. When Martin dumped all his money into real estate market, he was speculating. Every other investor that moved money into real estate was also speculating. And money was made hand over fist, but prices kept climbing as speculators sold to other speculators, and eventually people ran out of speculators to sell to. Martin lost everything. The banks took it all. He reminds himself every day about how foolish he was to put everything he had into this overpriced market. On rainy days, he tells himself the story of his failures. He tells himself 2 times on rainy days. The lesson truly hits home most clearly when his misery is at its highest point, and his misery is at its most poignant when the cardboard box that he calls his home is soaking wet.